Welcome back, second graders. So today is Tuesday, May 12th, 2020, and we are going to jump in with our next lesson, next lesson for measurement. For Spirit Week this week, today's color is yellow or orange. So as you can see, I'm wearing my yellow. I'm actually wearing a Big Bird shirt, and I have Big Bird here too with me. My daughter loves Sesame Street. So for today, in order for you to be ready for your math work, you need to have a piece of paper and a pencil or something to write with. As you're gathering those materials, I'm going to review a little bit of what we talked about yesterday. So yesterday we started measuring in inches, and you had a bunch of problems on your paper where you had to measure rectangles in inches for your exit ticket. The tricky thing about that is that the rulers that I gave you did not start at 0. So you had to use the ruler like a number line and figure out the total length of those rectangles. Remember, this here is one ruler. On one ruler, there are 12 inches. Today, we are going to be doing something similar. We are going to be measuring the length of objects, but this time, they're not going to be exactly to the inch on the ruler. So what we're going to have to do is use our rounding skills in order for us to figure out what the length of objects to the nearest inch. So think about rounding skills as I get the paper set up. Okay. Make sure you can see this okay. I'm going to zoom in. Great. So, for your problem-solving task today, it says, Chloe and Kamaya were asked to measure the trapezoid to the nearest inch. Take a look at the problem below. So as you can see, the problem says, how many inches long is the trapezoid? So this is a trapezoid. In case you forgot, it's a quadrilateral, which means it's a four-sided shape. And we can use this ruler down here to help us, because our job says Chloe said it was 4 inches long and Kamaya said it was 3 inches long. Who measured the trapezoid correctly to the nearest inch? Explain how you know on the lines below. So your job is to take a look at the measurements that Chloe and Kamaya got. One person got 4 inches, one person got 3 inches. And you need to figure out which student got the correct answer and how you know. This is where your rounding skills are going to come into play. So right now, I want you to pause the video, and on your paper for the problem-solving task, you need to decide who is right, Chloe or Kamaya, and explain how. Go ahead and make sure you pause the video. Okay, hopefully you had a chance to work on those explanations. I just need to reconfigure our setup here so that you can see me and the paper, or not me, but so that I can see the paper and you can see me at the same time. So it's really, really important that whenever you're solving any type of problem, you always do the work yourself first before figuring out who is right and who is wrong. So I'm going to grab a marker here and let's take a look. So they're trying to figure out the length of this trapezoid to the nearest inch, which means it's not going to be exactly at an inch mark. So I still need to follow the same procedure that we talked about yesterday. I need to draw a line from my starting point, which is 0, which is going to be really helpful. We're not going to have to think about we're not going to have to do any additional counting or number sentences or anything like that. But over here, when I draw my line down, it connects to this part of the ruler, somewhere between 3 inches and 4 inches. Now, when we're working with a ruler, and I want to zoom in here to this ruler where the trapezoid is so you can see it. When we're working with a ruler, it's really important that not only we know where the inch lines are, but also the lines for half of an inch. That's the middle point or the midpoint. So you can see here, here's the half inch between 0 and 1. Here's the 1/2 inch between 1 and 2. Here's the 1/2 inch between 2 and 3. It's a little bit longer than the other lines. Here's the 1/2 inch between 3 and 4. Here's the 1/2 inch between 4 and 5. And here's the 1/2 inch between 5 and 6. So now that we can see that, we can start to think about which, if this trapezoid is closer to 3 inches or 4 inches. Now, what I'm doing here in thinking about this is just like the thought process we go through rounding. I'm going to take this part of the ruler, which is 3 inches, and this part of the ruler, 3 inches to 4 inches. We know that that halfway mark is right here, and our trapezoid comes somewhere over here. So, is the trapezoid closer to being 3 inches or closer to being 4 inches? Well, I can see that it's past the halfway point between 3 and 4. And because it's past the halfway point between 3 and 4, that means it's much closer to 4 inches than it is to 3. So now we can take a look. Now we know that this trapezoid is 4 inches. And I'm going to add that word about because it's to the nearest inch. It's about 4 inches long. Now we can take a look at the rest of the problem and the student answers to see who we agree with and why. So it says that Chloe said it was 4 inches long and Kamaya said it was 3 inches long. So right away I know that I'm agreeing with Chloe. So hopefully in your problem solving task you agreed with Chloe as well and you know that it's 4 inches long. Now the reasoning behind it, which is really important, is what we're going to work on together. It said, I'm going to write Chloe is right because, now the answer I'm not going to put here is Chloe is right because I solved it and I got 4 inches too. That doesn't tell me why she's right. Chloe is right because the trapezoid let me think about this, because the trapezoid, the length of the trapezoid, let me just fix that, the length of the trapezoid is closer to 4 inches than 3 inches. I think we all can agree on that. I know this because the trapezoid is I keep just saying trapezoid, but that's not true, is that because the end of the trapezoid, right, because this represents our end point, the end of the trapezoid is after the midpoint between 3 and 4 inches. And so let's just talk about that one more time. The reason why I know Chloe's right and that it's closer to 4 inches is because here on the number line, and let me use a different marker, a different color here, the trapezoid is between 3 and 4 inches. And right here is the halfway point between 3 and 4 inches. And because the trapezoid, the end point, the end of the trapezoid is between the halfway point or the midpoint and 4, I know it's a lot closer to 4 than 3. And when you are practicing today or anytime you're doing any measurement, whether it's in 2nd grade or 3rd grade, it's really important that when you're measuring to the nearest inch, you have to use that midway point between inches to figure out if it's closer to the end point, or the inch that comes at the end, or the inch that comes before. And that's what we're going to be practicing today. And this reminds me a lot of the rounding work that we did during the end of our place value unit. So I'm going to be doing a lot of examples with number lines just to help you make sure you understand it. Awesome. Let me get my next page up here so we can work on a couple problems together before you work on a couple by yourself. So this very first problem here, and I'm just going to fix my board and zoom in to this problem. Says, measure the bunch of grapes to the nearest inch. Okay, so we have a different ruler here. As you can see, there's 0 inches to start and goes all the way to 8 inches. You might not be able to see that because of the way the paper was. Fantastic. Now you should be able to. Playing with technology. There we go. Okay. So the very first thing that I need to do if I'm solving this problem is I need to draw a line from my starting point and draw a line from my end point. So my starting point just happens to be 0 inches. And my end point, I'm going to turn so I can make sure I have an accurate line, is here. It's between 5 inches and 6 inches. And so our job is to figure out, is it closer to 5 or 6? So I'm going to highlight here with my yellow marker. Here's 5 inches. Here's 6 inches. And you know what? Right here, where the line is, that represents the midpoint between 5 and 6. I'm going to draw a number line so you can see it even more clear up here, what I'm talking about. So here is 5 inches, here is 6 inches, here is the midpoint, and you know what? Our grapes are right here on the midpoint. Now, if this was rounding and you had a number that was the midpoint, think back to if you would round up or round down. Hopefully you're remembering that whenever your point is on the actual midpoint, you need to round up. That's what we do in rounding. So I say whenever it's in the middle, you would round up. So the length of these grapes to the nearest inch would not be 5 inches, it would be 6 inches. So again, we're using our rounding skills to help us figure out which inch it's closer to. Are these grapes 5 inches long or are they 6 inches long? Well, because they're right in the middle between 5 and 6, that means that I'm rounding up to 6 inches long. Awesome. So now we're going to work on another problem together before you do one by yourself. Aluminum foil. This is a tool, this is something we've used in some science lessons. It's probably something you've seen at your house, maybe in your kitchen. And our job is to measure the aluminum foil to the nearest inch. So just like we did above, we need to draw a line for our starting point, which again is 0 inches. And then draw a line, and I just have to turn this to make it accurate, to draw a line to see where the end point is. Now, if I zoom in here to my end point, you can clearly see that it's between 7 and 8 inches. So I'm going to move my paper up a little bit so that we can draw that number line out so it's a little bit bigger. So 7 inches and 8 inches. This is the halfway point, that midpoint. Our job is to figure out if the aluminum foil is going to be closer to 7 inches or if it's going to be closer to 8 inches. And the aluminum foil, that endpoint line that we made, is right about here. Zooming out a little bit. So as you can see from the number line, from the ruler here, but also from this number line we created, the aluminum foil is just before the midpoint between 7 inches and 8 inches. And I'm going to add these labels just so we know. And because it comes before that midpoint between 7 inches and 8 inches, I know that I would have to round down to 7 inches. That means that the aluminum foil is closer to 7 inches than it is to 8 inches. And I'm really using this midpoint as a way to guide me. If it's on the midpoint or past the midpoint, I'm gonna round up. If it's before the midpoint, like in this example, I'm gonna round down. So this aluminum foil is 7 inches long. It's not exact, but we're using our rounding skills. That's the correct answer. Now it's your turn. I'm going to be posting up here 2 more problems, and we're going to be going over these problems together. So this isn't your exit ticket just yet, but these are the next 2 problems that you need to do on your own. Oopsie. There we go. Making sure you can see. All right. So the very first problem, and I want you to work on these on your own before we go over them, says measure the toothbrush to the nearest inch and measure the Hershey's chocolate bar to the nearest inch. One thing I'm going to do, because you do not, because this isn't something that's printed at your house, I'm going to highlight the midpoint between each of these inches, that halfway mark, so that you can see it so it's a little bit clearer. I'm going to do that for this problem on the top and the second problem as well. So the first problem, you have to measure the toothbrush to the nearest inch, and the second problem, instead of a toothbrush, you're going to measure the Hershey's chocolate bar to the nearest inch. So now I hope that now that I've highlighted the midpoints, the halfway points between inches, it's a little bit easier for you. So go ahead right now and pause this video so that you're able to figure out and measure the toothbrush to the nearest inch. Go ahead and pause the video. For the toothbrush and the chocolate bar, do both. Awesome. Hopefully you've had a chance to do this. I'm going to rearrange a little bit here, and we're going to go over the toothbrush problem first. So our job was to measure the toothbrush to the nearest inch. Now, the very first thing that I'm going to show you and I'm going to do is I'm going to draw my starting point line, which is 0 inches, and I'm going to draw my end point line somewhere over here. As you can see, my end point for my toothbrush comes after my midpoint. So I'm already starting to think, is it if it's 5 inches or 6 inches. If I were to show this work on a number line, just kind of taking this part of my number line and moving it down here, this part of my ruler, I have 5 inches here, I have 6 inches here, here's that midpoint, and then my toothbrush is right here. So as you can see from this number line, my toothbrush comes after my midpoint, that halfway mark. So because of that, it's a little bit closer to 6 inches. So if I was measuring this toothbrush to the nearest inch, the answer would be 6 inches because it comes after the midpoint. Awesome. For this second problem, you had to do the same thing with this Hershey bar. So I need to draw my starting point, 0 inches, and my end point, which is right there. Okay. Awesome. So as you can see, my end point here comes between 3 inches and 4 inches. So I'm going to zoom in on this part of the ruler down here. I have 3 inches, I have 4 inches, and then I have the midpoint between the two. When you look at this, you can see that the Hershey bar comes right after 3 inches. So based off of this, because the Hershey bar, because that end point, the end of it, comes before the midpoint, I'm going to be rounding down to 3 inches. It's super close to 3 inches, and this Hershey bar is about 3 inches long. Awesome. So now is your time to work on your exit ticket by yourself. That exit ticket is attached to this lesson in your Seesaw account. If you have any questions at all about this, please, please, please reach out to your teachers and definitely get their help with this. This stuff can be tricky. It's even trickier when you're doing it at home and you're using a computer and rulers that I'm giving you on the screen. But definitely remember those good habits of drawing your starting point and your end point and using those rounding skills, thinking about, does it come before the midpoint or does it come after the midpoint, so that you're able to measure objects to the nearest inch. Today was the yellow day for Spirit Week. Tomorrow is green. So make sure that if you have any pictures from today wearing yellow, that you send it to your teachers. You can post it on our parent Facebook page. It's up to you. And hopefully you'll see yourself in our morning motivation videos. Any questions at all, please let your teachers know. And why don't you go ahead and get started on your exit ticket. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow with another video.